My biggest tagline is all outer conflict is inner conflict.
Welcome back to the TroopHR podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Bradley. Today I'm sitting down with Deepa Pulipati, Executive Advisor of Conflict and Change Management at Tula Advisory. Today we're going to be exploring coaching, conflict competency, and what it takes to help leaders navigate some of the most difficult human dynamics that show up in the workplace, from performance and culture challenges to psychological safety and managing conflict where there isn't a simple resolution. Deepa brings a particularly unique perspective to this conversation. Her background spans marriage and family therapy, mediation, and now executive coaching. So she spent a significant part of her career helping people navigate where there often isn't a simple answer. And as always, I like to start the conversation at the ground floor. So I first start by asking Deepa what she thinks about coaching and what does coaching mean to her.
That's a very, very loaded question as far as I'm concerned, because I didn't start off as a coach. I started off as a licensed marriage and family therapist, doing very, very niche work in child custody conflict and dispute and resolution for many years. And about 10 years ago, I kind of pivoted to coaching, right? So for me, coaching is honestly about creating conditions for people to help themselves. It's not about me saving them. It's not about me doing something super magical, but it's really about how do I create conditions for people to feel psychologically safe, to have the trust in the process, and to save themselves.
An eloquent answer. And what I always find fascinating is what's the origin story here? Why get into and start your career this way? What drew you into that?
Well, I have to go a little bit further back to 1995, little old sweet me living and being raised in India and interested in psychology. We're talking 95 and having a traditional mother. I said, Mom, I want to do psychology. She looked at me like I was freaking cuckoo, right? And she said, no way. I'm like, what? Why? And she goes, no, then you'll become like really mentally inundated like your patients, and I can't have you do that. And then she goes, what, when you have a child, what will happen to the child? I said, Mother, I'm 16. Like, what? Right? So she was a bit dramatic, and you can see where I'm coming from, right? So fast forward 5 years, I came to this country in 98. I was married, I came here, and then my husband's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, psychology, go for it. Taylor, somehow innately I knew that I wanted to understand deeply what goes on in people's mind and how can I understand them. I didn't know if I could do something about it. Just a curiosity took me to a master's in marriage and family therapy. Imagine a 21-year-old coming to this country. No one who was Indian was doing psychology in 98. They were all doing tech. But I was like, no. Psychology, teach me everything. It was there for a long time, and I knew that this was the right decision I made when I got into my master's program.
It's such a unique story, and part that resonated with me is early in my career, some listeners will know, I was a firefighter paramedic. And one of the first things that my mom asked me was, how are you going to take care of your mental health, right? That's actually a really critical part, is how do you protect yourself while serving others? And that it's a skill, and it makes you deeply aware of the importance of, at least what I found helpful, meditation, of recognizing your limits as a human, and all that played beautifully, as I'm sure your experience has, into the field of HR.
Well, guess what? Like 4 years into it, I was so excited. Back in the day, we didn't have WhatsApp or no access to calling our parents back in India, right? So I called my mother like once a month and I'm like, Mom, guess what? I got a master's in psychology program, right? She was like, great, congratulations. I was like, what the heck? You didn't want me to get into mental health. She said, your husband, you're his responsibility. He'll take care of you. That's your traditional Indian mothers. But you know what? The thing that I knew from the very beginning was, as much as I was deeply interested in understanding people, I just knew that I'm not coming into this profession to save them, Taylor. I can't.
And it feels that coaches that I've worked with, or even managers, misinterpreting what their role is in that dynamic. And when you're working with leaders, what advice do you give them of taking on the perception or the approach that you have? What are some of the practical tips that you give? Because that isn't the normal way that we approach these types of problems. I learned very early on feedback my wife used to give me. I want you to listen, not solve my problems. What advice do you have?
Well, more than advice, it's a way of being, right? It's the lens we come under, right? So first of all, everybody comes in knowing that I'm a clinician at heart. So that's my pedagogy. What I bring, which is archaeology. So I never dig deep in coaching. Coaching is architecture for me, right? That's how I differentiate it. And I always preface it with, I'm going to support you. We'll create conditions for psychological safety. But the work comes from you, not me. I'm the container to hold and to process. But in between our sessions, if you don't do the work, you're not going to get anything out of this. And you know what, Taylor? This comes from my years of work as a mediator in child custody disputes. I mean, imagine the kind of families and parents that I've seen, and they are in their most vulnerable, toughest possible times in their life, right? And they're the ones who taught me how to be that container and be very real. There's no way around it. You're a corporate leader, you're paying me $1,000 an hour. Don't expect me to solve your problem for you. I can't. You gotta solve it yourself. They're like, what's the point of you? I'm like, to talk, to process.
It's such a critical aspect is many of the leaders, it's not solving the problems on their behalf, but getting them to realize they can solve this problem and changing their mentality behind it. One thing that you mentioned was dealing with people in vulnerable states. And this conversation comes up so many times when I work with leaders and they're going through a contentious conversation and they can't understand, why isn't this person responding to the logic? It's because they're responding with emotion, because we're human, right? And you've discussed before the concept of conflict competency. And this feels like this is just the right moment. Can you elaborate on what that means for our listeners?
Yeah. Well, Taylor, what is the color of this pencil?
Oh my gosh. Well, now I'm terrified to answer the question.
You brought something into it. You started it. Because you said logic. Come on. You know it.
I'll go with yellow, pencil yellow.
Yeah, right? It's a fact. It's logic. It's yellow, right? But what if I had somebody in front of me who looked at it and said, it's kind of like oranges mustard. It seems like a dark yellow. So what I'm dealing with in front of me is not a person who can be logical or rational. Right? So the first key for conflict competency is understanding that. And understanding that sometimes people are not going to be that. So when you understand who the person is in front of you, then you get to choose how you manage it. And now the other big piece of it is, my biggest tagline is, all outer conflict is in a conflict. So I'm pointing a finger, Taylor and I are working together. And I'm so mad at him. Like, he's doing all this. I'm coming to my partner and telling all about Taylor, right? But what are these three fingers doing here? They're pointing towards me. So I have to figure out, what is it about Taylor that's pissing me off?
A question that I've heard multiple times, I am sure.
And there's another thing in it. What is my part in it? What is my part in it? How was my engagement with it? What did I bring into it? I feel like once I get that clarity, I can come back to Taylor and engage much better. That at the core is my conflict competency skill.
In that aha moment, and I'm certainly going to steal this from you for our listeners, I want to illustrate for those that are unable to see the video is take your hand, point your finger, a single finger at anything in the room, and you'll see that your middle finger, your ring finger, your pinky finger are all pointing back at you. Beautiful illustration and such an eloquent aha moment. And, that brings me to what we see in the workplace. You've said before as well that most performance and culture problems are actually conflict problems in disguise. And aside from that alone being a whole thing we could spend an hour on, how do you get leaders to recognize that when they're describing that problem? In your example, what is it about Taylor that's pissing you off, right? What are the other questions that you help facilitate that discussion to bring light to this?
There's twofold to it, and it's going to be a bit of a long answer because I want to also talk to you about the process that how I come into organizations that'll create the context, and then how we actually discover what the actual issue is, creates a second context and answer to your question. Now, usually the minute I've realized this is a niche, this is where I love to work, just last year, mind you, I've really gone into it. When I've gone into it, I've had leaders reach out to me, word of mouth, and saying, hey, Deepa, I'm a manager, I'm a leader, I'm an AD, whatever, right? I have two of my people who are amazing leaders who hold two big functions. They are not getting along, and we've tried everything. What can you do for them? So I come in, I understand the problem. Then we have the buy-in of the leaders to the process. The process, I have named it after doing it so many times, and it's called conflict management process. Not conflict resolution, not mediation, not negotiation, conflict management, right? So what it is I meet with the leader, get a sense of what's happening, then meet with both the leaders individually for like an hour or two, like understand all their grievances about the other person and the system and company and everything. Then put both of them in the room with me for 3 to 4 sessions, 90 minutes. And what I'm doing there is I am looking at examples. I'm talking about feelings. Yes, that's important. But after a certain point, feelings, sorry, we'll put it aside for a second. And we are getting down to the nitty gritty as to what is the problem? Why are you both not able to get along? And I've realized there are 3 outcomes of me doing this several times. One is leaders are like, oh crap, this is so stupid. We both need to get along. And they have these like aha moments like you do, right? Like they're like, oh my God, what's wrong with us, right? And then we create a process for them to get along because you don't want a Deepa on your phone at all. On her speed dial, you do not want her. You want her to come and go like a guest. And then the second outcome is that they're like, crap, we are going to disagree. We're going to agree to disagree. But we love working for this company. We love doing what we do. We love the leader. So we'll create a workflow and process to move through that when there's a conflict in the future, not if, when. We'll mitigate it. The third is 3 out of 10 outcomes, a leader leaves the company. They're like, this is not for me, and I leave. And it's a good outcome for the company and for the leader, right? So that's the first part of it. And the other aspect of it is I've always realized when I've done a little bit of discovery work, performance is always about culture, Taylor. What are the conditions that the company has created for people to have an ability to really freely speak? You know this, you've done so much work around this. People can say that they have these conditions created, but the person who's in it has to experience that these conditions make them feel safe in order to speak. I've seen amazing HR departments who actually do a really good job of it being HR. And I've seen many, because of governance and process, they just can't. Even if they tell the leader, we support you, the leader is like, oh my God, anything I say could be brought up. So anytime we really talk about performance, as much as I'm not denying that some people, of course, there are performance issues, but a lot of times it's a culture that I want to talk about. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it reminds me of sometimes I'd say a tremendous benefit of bringing someone like you into the organization is HR has that neutrality perception issue that it can be contributing. And when I've spoken with HR leaders over the years, I can't solve this problem. I can't get these two teams. It's like, maybe you're not the right mediator for that, right? And then what I learned in my career as a first responder is it takes training. You've gone through extensive training. You're approaching this as a clinician, taking almost a clinical framework. I'm sure you have very similar ones that I did when I was a first responder. There is a method to this, and it takes practice.
Exactly.
One of the things that my paramedic professor said, I'll never forget, and it made me realize how first responders are so calm on scenes, is he told us, you're not paid actors, so don't get involved in the drama. And that enables you,
Yep.
to be the leader. And where HR practitioners can be a challenge is it's your company. These are your peers. It can draw you in. And so with that is, I think bringing in someone like you brings in such extraordinary value, even to the point, I love what you said, Deepa should come in and then go, right? And I think that's okay.
That has to be it. If I'm in the company for a long time, then there are bigger problems.
Yeah. The other piece that you've brought up, and I'll synthesize, is that recognizing and treating people like humans. And that ironically can be very challenging for HR teams sometimes. To your point, is we will get caught up in governance, or I can't say this, I must act like a robot in the room. And a great way to de-escalate is treating people like human. And that brings me to my second to last question as we come in here for a landing is your experience in San Francisco Superior Court, working with families through, I cannot imagine such difficult cases. What are two things that experience working with families in these extreme times really help inform the rest of your career?
First of all, I want to just acknowledge the fact that you being a first responder, you know exactly what it is. You know when you go in, you have so much heart, you have so much empathy, but you have to do the thing that's very important for boundaries. You have to do what's important in the moment rather than reacting to the moment, right? And I learned this very deeply being in court and working with so many folks that come in, right? So I really wanted to acknowledge our shared common work and why I really love first responders. They're amazing. So having said that, the two things that I think that really helped me with family court, one is there's so much heart and meaning. So there's a saying, I don't know if you've heard this, there's a saying in family court, and a lot of people kind of talk about it offline, is that in criminal court, the worst people, and we're not assigning worst, we're just generalizing, show up in their best behavior. And in family court, the best people show up in their worst behavior. Very, very true. But when they come to mediation to me, there's so much heart and meaning because they're not my clients, their kids are my clients. I never take my eye off the ball. I never do. That is singular focus I have because when I have two parents with me in the room, whatever I can do will improve the children's lives. That singular focus is what I bring to coaching. I'm deeply empathetic. I will absolutely validate and acknowledge each and every person's experience, but I have a very hard boundary, like where I'm able to say, you know what, tough shit. I hear you, empathize with you, but you have a job to do. Where's your responsibility to your job? Where's the integrity to your job? If you can't do it, then why are you here? That's number one. Lot of heart and meaning. The second thing is, I have to create the conditions here for people to feel safe, no matter who they are. I could have the most toxic leader come in who has a high P&L and who's bringing so much into the company. You coach these leaders. And I could have anybody in the room who's high performing. And I have to create conditions of safety. If I don't, they won't be able to share. I gotta at least try. Those are the two things foundationally that work.
And what I've appreciated is your recognition that sometimes the right answer, especially from the HR team perspective, is people moving on, right? I think we become fixated at times on retention versus this just may not be the right fit, right? And being comfortable with differentiated outcomes versus a myopic focus on one. Now, I could speak to you for hours.
Same.
The thing that we now have to get to is, if people want to continue this conversation with you, what would be the best way for our listeners to reach out and connect with you?
My email, so lame, so totally lame. But I'm updating my website. I have my wonderful brother here in India. I'm actually in India as I'm talking to you. And he looked at my website and he's like, what is this? I'm like, I know, I need to change it. So I'll send you my updated website, my email. That's the best way to reach me.
Fantastic. For listeners, we'll put that into the description of today's episode. Well, Deepa, it's been an honor speaking with you.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the TroopHR podcast. If you've liked this episode, we would encourage you to like and subscribe. If you would like to learn more about the TroopHR community, you can reach out to TroopHR.com. In the meantime, keep living the dream.